Hi, I'm Greg Dixon from Storyvan TV, and here we're with Egbert Jager. Egbert Jager, you would mess that up, from Insight Coaching, and we're going to talk about something today that might be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. We're going to talk about male sexual addiction. So Egbert, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do.
Good day, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity to talk with you and your audience. So I am a addictions recovery coach. I focus specifically on working with men who are dealing with compulsive sexual behavioral issues. So men that are struggling with porn addiction and sex addiction, those kinds of things. And I am here to help them make those changes in their relationship to sex and pornography so that they can really become the person that they truly want to be. Recovery from addiction is a hard and challenging road. It's especially hard and challenging if you're trying to do it on your own. And so working with a coach helps men to get connected with the resources that they need, with the education, with the other professionals in recovery that they need, and helps to make those changes a little more sticky, a little easier. You don't have to make all the same mistakes that everybody else has made before. And then you're just understanding that you're not alone.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So how what brought you to this? what
Right.
what
Yeah.
what do
So
you?
I like most sex addiction recovery coaches are here, and most recovery coaches in general are here because of lived experience. Meaning, I struggled with my own addiction, and I'm pretty grateful for the recovery work that I've been able to do, and for where I am in my life now, that I am able to acknowledge the harms that I caused both to myself and to others as a result of my addiction. I am really grateful for the recovery that allows me now to help other people to reduce their suffering. I've come now to appreciate that my vision has always been to that all hearts are free from suffering, and I know that suffering and trauma are some of the really key factors that drive addiction. And so, if I can help people to alleviate some of that and help them find some relief from their addictions, relief from their suffering, if they can find a little serenity, then that's what I really strive to do.
No, that's good. I think with yourself and also for others, part of it is realizing you have a problem, right? Is like what are the signs for somebody to look for that where you might realize that you have a problem? Is it going back to drug and alcohol addiction? Many people don't think they have a problem until a certain point, and then I guess the next stage is they realize there's something, and then the next stage is this, they realize to get to the point where they have to do something. So how does that look?
It looks really different for every person. There was a addiction specialist who spoke at my recovery coaching training, and he suggested that probably 70% of people do actually achieve reduction in their addiction behaviors on their own. And it was an idea that was really controversial for a lot of people. It's like, well, then they weren't really addicted. Then they didn't really have a problem. And what I've come to appreciate is that recovery success is really built upon your recovery capital. So those are all the factors sort of inside and outside of yourself that support you in changing your problematic behaviors. So for some of us, we didn't recognize our behaviors were problematic. We developed all sorts of coping mechanisms that allowed us to continue in our addiction and to not have it show up. We were very secretive. So much of it is isolation that both contributes to and enables addiction. But for some people, their rock bottom was simply a pothole. And I think that's because the resources they needed, the good friends, the connections, the strong emotional intelligence that they had allowed them to recognize what was going on pretty early. Some of the rest of us, we had to go back to that hole and keep digging and digging and digging. And eventually it looked more like an excavation for a skyscraper. And, it's not until your own rock bottom, when your own pain of continuing with the addiction is no longer covering up the pain of going on in life. So when your emotional discomfort is high enough that you recognize what's going on, hopefully then that's when somebody's there to meet you. Hopefully you've got a priest, a friend, a therapist, a recovery coach who can help you recognize what's going on and to help you connect with the changes that you need to do in order to get recovery.
Yes.
So that's the rock bottom story.
The
So what actually drives you into finally making the decision for recovery? What does it look like? Addiction looks like a life that's become unmanageable. So you're driven to do things that you wouldn't necessarily want to do. You are not given a choice. I mean, it is a compulsive behavior. And so you will try to make changes in your life. You may have tried to simply quit. You may be told yourself, I'm not going to watch any more porn. Or you started out saying, I'm only going to watch one. And then it's like, oh, I'll just watch for 10 minutes. And then it's, and then suddenly you've lost, half a day. Or you're watching pornography at work and you fail to show back up for your shift in the afternoon and you get fired. Whether you're using sex trade workers or various different ways that it shows up, it's, I won't spend any money. Suddenly it's spending money. I'll only do it once a month. And it just becomes chaotic and takes over your whole life. And more often than not, men don't recognize it's a problem until they are outed, until something shows up. Their spouse finds out that they're spending money on OnlyFans, or that, there's all these massagers showing up on the Visa bill, and then things are catastrophic. And so it would be great if everybody had the help they needed early and it didn't get to that stage, but more often than not, when a recovery coach is involved, somebody's life is on fire.
Do you think it may be harder for men to reach out? Is there more of a stigma for men, or is it really hard to tell? I think it's brave for anybody, no matter what, to get to the point where it says, okay, I have trouble and I need help, whether it's with finances or relationships or anything. Do you think is it different for men, or is it just a different kind of thing?
I think there's a lot of things in society that make it hard for men to seek any sort of help. We're working on improving mental health outcomes for all men. I, of course, only have lived experience as a man. Some of the women I have met through sex addiction recovery, they speak to the same difficulties. The shame that people have around their money is magnified a couple times over when it starts becoming things about sex and the things that we've done, because there's a lot of judgment that people fear or have experienced in the past around sex and relationships. And so I think it's equally hard for either men or women. And I'm really grateful that there are recovery coaches for both out there.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. So I was taking a look at your website, and you have some pretty good resources there. Maybe we can take a look at it here.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
Yeah. And so you might recognize that guy in the front there. Yeah. So one of the things I enjoyed about this website is you have the section on let's see if that's working right. Sexual addiction. So what it is, and then many of the things you just mentioned here with some of the signs that, or some of the behaviors that may be causing problems. So how to recognize what they are. And
some of those signs, I like the story of, if you throw a frog into hot water, it's obviously going to jump out. And yet if you put a frog in water and then you slowly raise the temperature, it'll stay there till it boils to death. And for lots of us in our addiction, what once started out as seemingly normal behaviors, and especially in society now, we always aspire for men to be sowing their oats, or dating the playing the field, being the playboy. There's lots of different expressions for guys, and it's some sort of male sexual prowess to go out there and have lots of relationships and to always be doing it, and to it's almost like it's a compliment if you've avoided marriage, or or oh, look at how successful he is, he dates a different girl every Friday. But when that's a compulsive addictive behavior because you're not able to connect with anybody on a meaningful level, there's no joy in it. People sometimes joke, oh boy, wish I had a sex addiction. I can tell you, you don't. It's not fun. It loses, the pleasure is lost. Your ability to experience joy is lost. You cover up pain and emotion, and you also cover up all the joyful feelings. And that just robs you of any reason to really be alive. I think that sex addiction is probably one of those factors that drives the really high levels of male suicide, especially in middle-aged and married men. It's something we don't often talk about, is just how high those rates of suicide are. And it seems more obvious that a substance use disorder or a drug addiction would lead directly to a death through overdose or some other factor. But I think it's the shame of sex addiction that drives a lot of men to take their own lives. And that's really a shame, because there is a lot of help out there. 12-step recovery groups, Buddhist recovery groups, lots of therapists that are trained in sex addiction, and of course, recovery coaches.
So yeah, that's good. So a number of resources. It's really good to know that there are resources there. What is the best way for people to find those resources?
So you can Google anything, for sure. Sex addiction recovery. It's getting more and more people are cognizant of some of what's going out there. Porn addiction, it's sometimes called sex addiction. It's sometimes called compulsive sexual behavior, might be a way of looking it up. You can certainly go to my website and click on any of the links for booking a free call. It's even if you can't necessarily afford recovery coaching services yourself, that free call and helping you get started on recovery and learning about where those resources are out there. Certainly Dharma Recovery was a part of my recovery, and I'm very grateful for that community, for the help that they do with people of all sorts of addictions. And then there's 12-step addiction recovery programs, multiple different kinds. Some of the meetings are men only, some of the meetings are women only. And there's some really, really great communities out there that do work. Some of them have got weekend retreats where you can do an intensive time in a 12-step program. And of course, there's always the paid recovery complexes. The people that go to a specialty place for 30 days or 90 days. We often traditionally call them rehabs. It's a place to sober up, and literally withdrawal and sobering up from sex addiction is just as much a thing as it is from drug addiction. It's not as likely to kill you as some of the other withdrawals from other substance uses are, but that itchy twitchy stuff is really apparent. It can be really quite overwhelming. It's what leads a lot of people back into relapse, is not knowing how to detox from their addictions.
Is there an overlap sometimes with people who have drug and alcohol addiction with sexual addiction?
And there absolutely is. Lots of the recovery programs do talk about trying to, they sort of circumvent the topic. They talk, like be good when you're dating, like look after yourself and don't do anything bad. Nobody necessarily wants to talk about directly about how much it is possible to harm other people and yourself with inappropriate sexual relations. And those driving factors are there. There's a joke, and I love jokes and humor. So, the joke is that a sex addict and an alcoholic walked into a bar. His name was Bob. So yeah, it's very much there. Lots of people spend 15 years in Alcoholics Anonymous, and then they come on over into a different program, realizing that they just substituted or developed a stronger sex addiction to replace their alcohol. That was their coping mechanism when they weren't
Yes, yeah.
clean with that.
My sense is that with all these addictions, nothing will really work until you decide you want to change. Uh, yeah, I think sometimes I think people are go into programs because they're mandated to go into programs or they think they have to, but it really isn't until they decide that this is not how they want to continue that real change happens. Yeah, I'm just speaking as a layperson here, but that's my suspicion. So
Yeah, we've certainly seen an increase in the number of courts that are mandating, especially substance use, people with substance use disorders, that they be mandated that they go into some type of recovery program as part of their sentence. What's the word I'm looking for? Sentence reduction,
yeah,
and part of their parole, even necessarily, that they've got to be going to these programs. And that's um, sometimes if they're just at least willing enough to show up, then they might find a connection. They might find somebody else there who's got the same story who can connect with them and build that up. But you're right. If you're not prepared to at least do some of the work, and a lot of that work is really deep introspection work, it can be really tough to find recovery. There's lots of people that do the walk for a little while and talk the talk for a little while and convince other people that they're good, and then pretty soon they're back at it again. And
okay,
you
yeah,
know they've lied one too many times to a spouse, and suddenly they've lost a job, they've lost a spouse, they've lost access to their kids. They're if they're unfortunate enough that they were caught in a sting, then they might find themselves with a criminal record. If the turns out that the sex trade worker they were with was underage, now all of a sudden they're on a list, and their lives are totally well, they're not totally lost, but they're going to have a really rough time of making a go at it for the rest of their lives.
yeah,
But but there is always hope for recovery. It doesn't matter how long you've been at it or how deep that hole you've dug. Recovery is possible for everybody, and we all deserve it.
yeah. That's a great message. There's always hope for recovery.
There is. There
Yeah,
is.
and you listed off quite a few resources, and people can visit you again. I'll put your connection up here again there, so they can go to your website or your LinkedIn, contact you, book a call. They
Yeah,
use a like with you Calendly, and you have a discussion, and all totally in privacy. I'm assuming, and
there is. Yep, absolutely. Total discretion. We don't need to talk about all the different things that have gone on. We're just going to be talking about how to move forward.
yeah,
Um, if you're looking for a therapist, what to look for in a therapist, because there's lots of different options out there.
yeah,
Um, and there's advantages to knowing, to getting a therapist that's been trained specifically in sex addiction. Um,
yes,
and that's a little bit to do, of course, with the betrayal trauma that their partners have experienced, and making sure that they, you know, decrease the amount of harm that they're doing, ideally to zero, and help their partners to recover. And then certainly a sex addiction therapist can help them to do that. Even learning some of the resources through me or through their own research about what they can do and what helps is all really important. And there are resources all over. And hopefully, what I can do is to help to connect them to that so that they can get on and have that recovery that works.
So, do you want to say a little bit more about betrayal trauma?
It's not my area of expertise, but I can tell you that when a spouse learns, as they often and they almost always will, that their partner is a sex addict and has been, the term we typically use is acting out. So if you've agreed with your spouse that you're not going to watch porn, and then they find out you're watching porn, or you have marital vows that say, of course, that you're not going to have sex with anybody else, and they discover you're having sex with somebody else, that betrayal can be devastating. And if it turns out that you've been doing it for years and your whole marriage is a lie, then they can get to a place where they're literally experiencing their own form of PTSD. All the harm that you've caused yourself in decades of addiction is suddenly sprung on them all at once.
Right.
And the whole idea that their entire decades of marriage could be a lie is brutal.
Yes.
And so, it's that betrayal trauma is real, and the recovery from that is something that the spouses themselves need their own support network for. So I often tell my own clients to build up a recovery team, and I really encourage any spouse who thinks or knows that their partner is a sex addict to start building up their own recovery team. So that you have a mental health expert. There are, again, trained sex addiction therapists who really specialize in that betrayal trauma to help you understand what's going on, what's the right way for you to approach this. Do you need time off? Do you need a break? Is it over? Everybody's got their own story and situation, and lots of different things all combined together. It can go lots of different directions. Yeah. Lots of times the therapists will say, don't do anything significant for the first 2 years, after you've discovered this has gone on. And I cannot imagine how difficult it must be for a wife to go 2 years with a guy who's a sex addict. And I don't know if he's going to do recovery or not. Of course, I'm making a decision. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
That may make sense for her. It might make sense for the kids. But I can also tell you that the odds of recovery are increased if the sex addict has a supportive environment in which to do his work. Does that mean that she should stick around for his recovery? No. She's got to make choices based upon what she needs.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's absolutely some really important stuff that goes on in there, and it can be very challenging. And I've heard of marriages that split up early and get back together. And I've heard other cases where, he's got 5 years clean, sober, he's healthy, he's great recovery, and they still end up breaking up.
Yeah. It's just, there's not a good
there's no
path to going back.
Guarantee of anything. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Life can be complex and messy sometimes, for sure. Anyway, thank you very much for the work you're doing and for help. And again, I'll put this, if you want to make an appointment with Egbert, and
there's not too many Egberts and Jagers out there. So
not too many. The only one on LinkedIn, probably.
Yeah.
It's a good thing about having it. Yeah. That's a good thing about having a unique name, right? Greg Dixon, there's lots of us around. And I had a friend, I did a website for somebody, Greg James, of course, the two first names, right?
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for having me. I really enjoyed it. I said, I hope this reaches at least one person out there and enables them to find recovery. I said, book that free call. We'll get you connected and started on the road. And if that involves me, great. If it doesn't involve me, great. At least we helped you get started.
That's right. One person at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
One person at a time. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to play this little video now.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.